governor. Now, I might be an American myself, but I find myself a lover of all things that are quintessentially British, which include a nice cup of tea, the Queen of England, a lovely rainy day like today, and 3 Land Rovers all parked together in a small space. Welcome to what is the ultimate late 1990s / early 2000s Land Rover comparison. We are going to find out what is the best Land Rover from a Land Rover standpoint and what is the most quintessentially British. So, in the white corner, we have a 2003 Land Rover Discovery Series 2, one of my all-time favorite off-roaders. In the black corner, we have a 2002 P38 Range Rover Westminster Edition. And in the smelly, leaky, broken down red corner, we have a 2004 Freelander V6. My 2004 Freelander V6. So let's go ahead and take a detailed view at each of the contestants before we go into the criteria. First, we're going to start off with what is officially my favorite 4x4 SUV ever made, the Land Rover Discovery Series 2. The Discovery has an interesting history of 4 generations of looking like the same boxy SUV that it always has been, and then an awkward, obscure 5th generation that's pretty ugly, and we'll forget about the Discovery 5. But I love the Discovery Series 2. I grew up being driven around in the back of one, and I think it is such an underrated 4x4 SUV. They're reliable by, They're reliable by Land Rover standards. They're gloriously upright, tall, and boxy. They've got decent towing capability, decent off-road capability. They look good, especially with a roof rack like this. And I just love how they drive, which we'll touch on later. But again, this is a 2003 facelift model Discovery Series 2. The facelift came out in, I believe, 2002. It has a 4.6 liter with around 220 horsepower version of the world famous Rover V8, which was actually originally a Buick engine, but we'll forget about that. In standard configuration, it gets around 13 miles per gallon, but this roof rack drops that by about half. We'll forget about that again. This car was originally purchased by my dad for $1,200 with, surprise, surprise, a blown head gasket, which you'll see is a theme here. But he got it for $1,200, which is basically what the roof rack is worth. So he got it for an absolute steal, and it's actually been pretty decently reliable since he bought it a couple years ago and fixed it. It's only broken down once, and we drove it to California and back, and it's good. Now, the Discovery Series 2 is marketed as an off-road SUV for the whole family. So this is a 5-seater model, but you could also get it as what's called the SE7, which had a 7-seater configuration. It still has the low-range gearbox and available locking differentials and hill descent control, all the good Land Rover stuff, but it's built as something that you can take the entire family on off the beaten path. In the United States, the Discovery Series 2 is only available with a 4-liter or a 4.6-liter V8. I know there's a 5-cylinder diesel available in other markets, but all we got was the V8. Moving over to the larger headache, but in a smaller package, we have the 2004 Freelander V6, which, if anyone has seen my channel before, you will know that this belongs to me, and you will know the interesting ownership history that I've had with it over the past 2 years. But the Freelander is an important part of Land Rover's history because it is their first car to use a unibody chassis, not a body on frame sort of truck configuration like the Discovery and the Range Rover here. And it was their first car that was marketed as a basic model. Now, this means that it's a cheaper way of getting people into the Land Rover ecosystem. So they buy a Freelander wanting this, but they can't afford it. But they work harder, and then they gain the ability to buy what they've always wanted, which is the Range Rover. This Freelander is the top of the line HSE package, which I think was around the same price as this Discovery here, which I don't know who in God's name would buy a Freelander wanting 18-inch wheels instead of a Discovery, but I wasn't the one that bought it new. So the Freelander has a 2.5 liter dual overhead cam V6 engine produced again by Rover, but it was on an off day. They'd had a bit too many tea and biscuits when they designed it, so they forgot to design it properly. And as a result, almost no Freelander V6s exist on the road anymore. Except for this one, finished in beautiful Alveston red metallic over in, what was it? It was something leather interior. It's beige. It's worth mentioning because the Freelander is actually more important to Land Rover's history than people like to admit. It was also a Camel Trophy car like the Range Rover and the Discovery were originally. So it's still a Land Rover through and through. It's still good off-road despite the fact that it doesn't have a low-range gearbox or locking differentials. It still deserves its badge when it comes to driving it off the beaten path. And finally, we come to the one that people really wanted back in the day, the Range Rover, the full-size Range Rover, the Daddy. This Range Rover in particular is a Westminster edition from the final model year of the P38 generation, which went from 1994 to 2002. It's easily the best looking of the three. It's easily the most luxurious, and it was easily the most expensive. I think this car had an original asking price of something like $75,000 in 2002, which was a lot, despite having the same 4.6 liter V8 as in the Discovery of the day. In this configuration, it made around the same, about the same amount of horsepower. The problem with the Range Rovers is they had electronic issues that would ruin the owner's lives down the line. Now it's time for us to move on to the criteria on how we are going to judge these big unreliable hoopties, and we're going to find out which is the best overall. Now, it is a video about Land Rovers, so first we have to get over what is a touchy subject with people of the United Kingdom who really love these things, which is reliability. Now, when I judge based off of reliability here, none of these cars are reliable per se. If you own a Toyota or anything Asian, Japanese, anything that's like built well, none of these are by any means reliable from your standards. But we're talking about Land Rover standards, which is the most reliable. And now, that would mean that we are going to have to give the reliability trophy to the Discovery, because the Discovery has the least overall fatal flaws engineered into it. Again, like I said, it's still not reliable. These things were plagued with head gasket problems. Actually, all three of these are plagued with head gasket problems. But the Discovery, with its head gasket and cooling issues, was really all you needed to worry about with one of these. Buy one of these like my dad did, replace the head gaskets, and you've got what is a decently reliable, decently good 4x4 SUV that you can drive around in for a couple years before you have to do the head gaskets again. The Freelander, well, head gaskets is a problem, which again, the way that this engine was designed, doing the head gaskets on this takes about 10 times the headache, 10 times the time, 10 times the swear words and the blood, sweat, and tears as the Discovery or the Range Rover, because again of the way it's been designed with 3 timing belts and a cramped engine bay with a transverse V6 layout. It is an absolute nightmare, and anyone who knows me or my YouTube channel will know about this already. Not only do the head gaskets like to fail on the Freelanders, the automatic transmissions also like to fail, which is a standard thing on the V6, which was only available in the United States, and the prop shafts like to fall off, which will effectively render it two-wheel drive, which is not what you want from a Land Rover. Moving over to the Range Rover, we have the same head gasket problems, but Another tricky issue, which is the gremlins that will come with electricity and age, that are starting to affect this one. The temperature gauge in it isn't working, which is making passing emissions complicated. But Range Rovers, again, are known for electrical problems that will make your life a living hell. I don't understand electricity, so I wouldn't want anything to do with that. I'll stick with the problems that this car has. But anyways, the winner of reliability is the Discovery. Runner-up, the Range Rover, and the loser, the Freelander, which is surprising considering this was their cheapest model, and this is what was supposed to get people into the ecosystem. And now, the way you get somebody into a car company ecosystem is not with a hideously unreliable starter model. That is not the way you're supposed to do it. I'm not a CEO of a car company, but I know that's not a good idea. Again, reliability is more of a touchy subject, but we'll move on from the reliability for now. Forget about that, and we'll come to practicality. Now, these are sports utility vehicles, so they must be utilitarian. And so what do they have to offer when it comes to practicality? Now, we're going to check cargo area, rear seat room and comfort, and front seat room and comfort, including storage, and we'll also gloss over technology, which is, if anyone's seen my recent BMW i4 review, this isn't going to take as long. Let's just say that. Right, so practicality. Discovery Series 2 first. Let's open up the back, and we find a vast cargo area back here. Now, again, this car was also available as a 7-seater. So, with 7 seats in place, there's basically no room back here, but it does give it an extra point for practicality because, again, you can carry more people. However, you will be a Land Rover enthusiast, so you won't have enough friends to fill it up, which is probably why most of these are 5-seaters. Cargo area is great, and you also have these little chest drawers in the 5-seater model, which is pretty useful, and a big area back here where you can carry, napkins for when you need to check your oil, an umbrella for when you're stranded outside on the side of the road and you're getting wet from the rain. One interesting thing is there's a door handle back here, so people in the back seat can get out when they need to. And sort of strange to see in the 5-seater model, but there are air vents back here for the third row passengers. You also have these safari windows, which increases comfort. It'll be less claustrophobic inside, and it's just cool. You get to look up into the trees. How cool is that? In the Discovery Series 2, you can also fold down the second row of seats as you can with the others, and you can fit bodies in here, which is great. You never know. Discoveries are known to be bought by murderers, according to Top Gear, so that's a nice feature. And what's that I see back there? A cigarette-style charging outlet, which is pretty uncommon for a car from 2003. So this has got a very good cargo area back here. So obviously, when it comes to a 3/2-row SUV, cargo area in the back is important, but equally important is how much space you will find in the back. Now, this rear door has such a tiny opening at the bottom. It's a little bit tricky to squeeze yourself in when you're, let's say, a taller human being, and that's not very good. There's not a lot of space back here. I've got no leg room. I'm sitting quite upright, which for long journeys is gonna hurt your back, and there's not much room to stretch out. I do have plenty of headroom thanks to this curved up roof design. And I've got air vents back here and storage vents included with an optional climate control system back here with air conditioning fitted to this car, which is very good for long journeys. I also have a second sunroof that I can operate back here, which is really cool. If I fold up this seat, this center armrest, it pushes the headrest up. It's a little bit over-engineered, but once you get it, you've got plenty of room to fit 3 people side by side. So it's good in the width area, it's good in the height area, and for amenities, but for leg room and back support, it's atrociously bad. And again, getting in and out is very difficult thanks to this tiny opening here. Look at that. So the back seat was good, but could be a lot better. What do we think of the front seat? Now, there's not a lot of room in here. If I move the seat back, which I think it's back all the way, yeah, this is as far back as the seat goes, and I still feel like I'm pretty close to the steering wheel, and it's not very roomy in here, and it does feel quite old-fashioned with this flat dashboard. It's a lot more comfortable than it is in the second row of seats. And again, I've got enormous amounts of headroom in here, but not a whole lot of leg room, and I can't move my legs about very much. In terms of luxuries and amenities, I have a cassette player radio, which some people still use, but I don't, and a CD player somewhere. A climate control system, which beeps when you press physical buttons to operate it, which is strange, and a clock, which is great. I've got a cigarette style outlet here, which is standard for cars of this type. I've got heated seats for the front, and I've got a bunch of buttons up here on around the gauge cluster, which is in a strange place for it. And I've also got rear fog lights, which is really, really cool. That's not something you see on American cars for sure. And this really big and dense steering wheel. This whole airbag assembly here takes up a lot of room, which is surprising. I've got my sunroof controls here. I've got storage for CDs and maps. First sunroof, there's a second sunroof back there. I've got plenty of storage here, plus 2 more cup holders that I would never use personally. And yeah, so up here it's a lot better than it is in the back, but again, it's still not perfect. It does feel pretty old-fashioned in here, and there could be more room, but it's good enough for me. To open the door handle is kind of in a weird spot. It's all the way down by where the hood release is, which is strange, but I guess you'll be reaching for them quite often next to each other. So it's nice to have one fluid motion from the hood release to the door handle. So that's a nice touch. Thank you, Land Rover, for that. So we move on from Practicality with the Discovery Series 2, which was really, really impressive in some areas, not very impressive in other areas, but overall it was pretty good. Now, we move on to a much smaller SUV, the Freelander. And to do that, we have to open the back door, so just look away for 1 second. There. All right, we're back. It was that long since I drove it. The Freelander has a much smaller cargo area back here than the Discovery, but it does sort of make up for it with an underfloor storage compartment, which is lockable, which is nice. I've got a cargo cover, and again, the rear seats do fold down. And what's really nice about the Freelander is that when you fold the rear seats down, you can go back around and fold them up against the driver and passenger seat. Which, when you do that, nothing to see here, makes it actually a really good little cargo van back here. There's a lot of space. It's nice and square. I just moved recently, and I was able to fit a surprising amount of garbage in the back of this. Now that this has suddenly Now that this has suddenly appeared, you can see that, like the Discovery, you have a storage pocket, but there's no door handle release because there's no 3-row seating option, obviously. But you do have that, which is nice. Now you can take that back. All right. Ow. So we move on from the small cargo area to rear seat room, which is not as bad as you'd think for a much smaller car when you compare it to the Discovery. So we get inside and we see there's much of the same problem as in the Discovery. It's about the same amount of legroom, which is in the negative. And again, you sit quite upright, which I imagine will bother you for long journeys. And if I sit up, I actually don't have as much headroom. I can't sit up all the way back here like I can in the Discovery. But like in the Discovery, I have these nice little storage nets here, which are very nice and useful. I never use them. And I've got a light back here, which is good. I don't have an available air conditioning system back here, which kind of stinks, but oh well. I've got a cigarette style charging outlet back here, which is nice to have. I've got an ashtray and a center armrest that isn't as over-engineered as it is in the Discovery, but it still has the cup holders in the center and everything, and it's quite good. So, rear seat room is about what you'd expect for a car of this size, and it's not disappointing like it is in the Discovery. So we move on from the back seat of the Freelander, which was, again, not surprising, but still not bad, to the front seat, which, amazingly, I've got oodles of more legroom in here than I do in the Discovery, and it surprisingly, even though it's a much smaller car, it's actually a lot less cramped on the inside than the Discovery, which is amazing to think about considering the sheer size difference. Again, I have a radio, but instead of a cassette player, it's just a CD player. I also have heated seats, a center storage area, which isn't as large as it is in the Discovery. With this switch here, I can operate the rear window, which currently isn't working, but it did a while ago. I've got two cup holders here, if you want your drink to be baked in the sun while you park the car on a hot day. And I've got a cup holder in each door panel here, which is actually a really good cup holder because it holds the drink in very tight. This steering wheel is a lot less busy and a lot less dense than the Discovery. It is more tastefully worn, but it is a better steering wheel to hold in the hand. And again, it's surprising because it's actually more comfortable to sit in the front seat here than it is in the much larger Discovery. And with that, we move on to the one that people really wanted. Again, the big, expensive, full-size Range Rover. You may have noticed that the Discovery and the Freelander both have rear spare tires, which means that they had to have what are called door backs, where the back opens just like a traditional door. The Range Rover, however, has always been a little bit different. So we press this button here, and this part opens up. As we open it, we can see the rear wiper, which is hidden, unlike it is on the Freelander and the Discovery. We push this up, press the button again, and we've got what you call a split folding tailgate. We look inside and we find about as much room width and lengthways as you do in the Discovery. It's not as tall and boxy in here, but it's still pretty good. And you can also sit on this back tailgate, which you can't really in the Freelander. So, cargo area is again pretty good. Unlike in the Discovery, there's no 7-seater option on the P38 Range Rover. They actually only just brought that out for the new Range Rover. But again, it's really not too bad. And we move on to the back seat of the P38 Range Rover. As I said before, with the Discovery, which has a similar body-on-frame chassis, this rear door is actually a lot wider than it is in the Discovery, which makes getting in much easier. And it has the best overall room inside of any of the cars. It's actually got about a ½ an inch of legroom, which is great. I can sit back a little bit more, and I've just barely got enough headroom. I've got vents back here, but I can't control the temperature or the airflow as much as I can in the Discovery. Overall, this is a much more comfortable car to sit in. Easily wins rear seat room. And onto the front seat of the P38 Range Rover, which, again, thanks to this huge steering wheel, doesn't feel as roomy in the front as the Freelander, surprisingly. But I do have more amenities up here because it is the full luxury Range Rover. I've actually got a navigation system here, a prehistoric navigation, which is pretty funny to look back on considering how huge infotainment screens are nowadays and how intuitive and easy to respond they are. But this is, it works. It feels so much better put together in here than it does in the other cars because, again, this is the most expensive car that they made, so it has to be. I've got nice wood trim right here, which I don't have in the other cars, and it just feels, overall, it just feels more substantial in here thanks to this lovely Land Rover analog clock. So yeah, it's got a really nice front seat area, and I don't have storage up here like I do in the Discovery, but what I do have in all of them is this higher rollover risk warning, which basically says if you turn the wheel at high speeds, you'll roll over and kill yourself. And they all have that because they're classic 4x4s through and through. What about looks and appearances? To anyone with eyes, that is an important aspect when it comes to purchasing a new car. The Freelander is the most blobby, 90s, kind of swoopy, modern styling looking vehicle of the three, but it does take a lot of styling cues from the Discovery, including the raised roof up here. And I think overall it is a really good looking car if you get the facelift one. The pre-facelift Freelander is hideous. It's got these hideous plastic bumpers up here. It looks like it was something made by Little Tykes in the early 2000s. It's just not the way to go. The facelift Freelander is much better. The Discovery is big and boxy and tall, and I love that. The Range Rover is very substantial. And I tell you what, you guys, the weather is getting a little bit too British for me, so why don't we hop behind the wheel and talk more about the cars inside while we drive. And we're gonna decide on a final winner there. So let's start with where everybody starts, the Freelander, the cheapest car in the lineup. Let's get out of this weather, shall we? Okay, here we are driving what is objectively the most unreliable of the three. So it is custom procedure when this happens to put on your emergency life vest and get ready for okay, all right, we're good. Okay, lights on. So let's go for a drive in what is easily, in America at least, the rarest of the three. Like, remember it. Okay, there we go. I couldn't remember. I haven't driven in a while because it does have some problems. Like that. And as you saw earlier, my back window decided to stop working. But when driving the Freelander, one thing that's really nice about it is the way that it disguises its size. Now, when I see it parked next to the P38 Range Rover, it's so tiny in comparison. It looks like it shouldn't even be part of the same lineup. It looks nowhere near as substantial or expensive as the Range Rover, but then you get behind the wheel and there's actually more room up here than anywhere than in either of the other cars, which is really surprising. And thanks to this commanding driving position, which we will touch on again, it honestly feels a lot bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's almost like the TARDIS, which is, again, is a British invention, technically. A fictional British invention. And it just really feels big in here. And one thing that I like about it is that it drives and it handles like a big truck, which for modern SUVs isn't what you want. Modern SUVs try so hard to disguise their immense weight and try to handle like sports cars, but that's what I love about this, is that it knows that it's not a sports car, and you get what you get when you drive it. It's an SUV. You have to deal with all the downsides of driving an SUV, and if you don't like it, then you go buy something else, which I just love about this. It just feels like a classic 4x4, especially when you look up and you see this higher rollover risk warning. And it's, at the end of the day, it's a small SUV. It's a compact SUV. And I just love that about it. It's just so unashamed of what it is. In terms of driving experience, again, it's got the most unreliable engine of the three, so full acceleration in this car is not an enjoyable thing to do because it's very stressful. But it's got enough power. You don't really want any more in something like this. It's worth mentioning that this car was also sold as a 4-cylinder and diesel in European markets, but in the States, all we got was the V6 with the automatic. And it's decent enough power, but it does get 15 miles per gallon, which for a 2.5 liter V6 is atrocious. If you ask me, that's not where you want to be. One interesting thing about this transmission is that it has a manual function, which is surprising for a car like this. I never use it really. What's the point? One thing that I've always liked about the Freelander is the ability to roll down that back window. It's pretty cool. And if you go for the Freelander SE3, you get a half convertible over the back seats. Like the entire back lifts out, and over the front seats you've got T-tops. Now, I would have bought one of those, except I didn't think that they were sold in the United States when I bought this one. I wanted an SE3, but again, I didn't think I'd ever be able to get one. And to be honest, I've never seen one locally for sale. I mean, the 5-door Freelanders in the States are incredibly rare, but the SE3 makes this look like a Honda CR-V driving around. I hate it when people call this a Honda CR-V. It does not look like a Honda CR-V. It just doesn't. Stop calling it Honda CR-V, please. I spend so much time, so much headache working on this car, ensuring its reliability for the future. I spend so much time on that so that I can have a Land Rover and people call it a CR-V. It's not fair. But again, the Freelander does drive pretty well, and actually over bumps and things, it's quite comfortable. It's a unibody, so there's less shaking around like we'll get to in the Discovery in a bit. Again, the ride is pretty okay. The handling is bad. I mean, it rolls a lot in the turns, but again, I think that's hilarious, and I love that about it because it knows what it is. It's not a sports car. You don't get a sports car when you buy this. It's a great car to just drive every day in the town. It's great off-road, as we've seen, despite the fact that it has the least impressive resume when it comes to off-road equipment. No low range, no locking differentials, it's just you, 4-wheel drive, hill descent control. It's got a viscous coupling in the center, which is the source of a lot of problems. So overall, it's a good driving car. It's not great, but if you come to it with SUV expectations for the downsides and things, it's pretty good actually. I mean, it's about what you'd expect for a car of this type, and it drives, I think it drives quite nicely, and ride quality is pretty good too. So we're back here. I'm gonna go hop in that white car now. Okay. Here we are in the Discovery Series 2, which is my favorite 4x4. Not just due to nostalgia, but again, earlier, just a couple minutes ago, I was talking about how I really appreciate the Freelander for the fact that it's so unashamed of what it is, and the way that it handles, and the way that it drives. And the Discovery is just a pure form of that. When you're driving this thing, it just feels immense. I mean, Sure, the front seat room isn't as good as it is in the Freelander, but it's still good enough. And if I look behind me, I see tons and tons of windows, which is so cool because so many modern cars have these designs and they look swoopy and you can't see out the windows very much. But in this is an old SUV, and I mean, I can see everywhere. I've got this big flat windshield that's right up against my face, and it just feels so pure. It feels so different from all the modern cars that have to be so safe and restrained and refined, and I just love that about this. But the one thing that I really don't like about the Discovery is driving it over uneven terrain. Jesus. Yeah, see what I mean? See what I mean? The thing that these Land Rovers have that a lot of other cars fail to touch on is character. People that drive Land Rovers love their Land Rovers. They're like us humans. None of us are perfect. We all have problems. And the Land Rovers certainly do have problems. It's those little things that make you proud and make you love it for what it is. Now this is a 4.6 liter V8 with only 40 horsepower more than the 2.5 V6 in the Freelander. And it's a much heavier car, so it feels about as quick as the Freelander does, unsurprisingly. Fuel economy is just don't even ask. I think this car on the highway with its big Voyager roof rack gets 12 miles per gallon. 12. But it does have available 3-row seating. It's big, it's good off-road, it's damn cool. I don't care what other people think of me in this car, but I just, you know, I don't care because I love it. Except for when it does that. But I do love it, and it's just a great 4x4. It's just absolutely lovely. I would easily have one if I could afford the gas for it. Well, we have one more car to test and a conclusion to make. So let's go and hop in that black Range Rover, see how that compares. All right. It really wants me to put my seatbelt on, apparently, which I will. 196,000 miles on this. Gotta be one of the most high mileage Range Rovers there are out there. But here we go. Driving the P38 Range Rover. For some reason it's got a completely different wiper control than in the Discovery and the Freelander. Because I guess the Discovery and the Freelander standard switch to adjust the intermittent wipers is too plebeian for Range Rover people. So this is the same 4.6 liter V8, as I said, as the Discovery. And the Discovery was great, but where the Discovery missed out on was its ride quality. Everything else, it felt great, it was big, it was good. Ride quality wasn't very good, but the Freelander had good ride quality, but very bad fuel economy for what it is, and it also handles horribly. So how does the Range Rover compare? Well, the Range Rover doesn't feel as immense and large as the Discovery does, but it does definitely ride better than the Discovery. Definitely feels better built from behind the wheel than the Freelander or the Discovery, and it's just a big Range Rover. And honestly, this is also the most talented in an off-road environment, and it's quintessentially British, and it still has that same character that the Discovery and the Freelander do. Not that much of it, because it doesn't have as many bad points as the Freelander and the Discovery, but it's a very, very good car, and people love Range Rovers. If you own a Range Rover, people look at you in a different way than they do if you own a Discovery or a Freelander. a little bit of a shake, but not as colossal as it is in the Discovery. And it's very quiet in here. And it's just nice to know that if I see a hedge over there or some dirt, mud, rocks, I can just drive over it, no problem. I can get where I want to go, either by the roads or as the crow flies. In terms of power, it's gutless like the other two. I mean, it really doesn't have a lot of power. 220 horsepower in a car this size and this weight. Yeah, I mean, power isn't a strong suit for these vehicles, but I would say that it does feel a little bit easier to accelerate than the Freelander and the Discovery. Conclusion time. Now, which was the most British? Which was the most unreliable, the most practical, the best car, and the best Land Rover? So, the most British was the Freelander. Now, the Freelander is the European alternative to a comparable, reliable car. It has the rear fog lights. It's got questionable build quality, but it definitely has that character that you always look for in a British car, but it is also hideously unreliable and difficult to maintain, which I hate to say it is a British trademark. Which was the most unreliable? Again, it was the Freelander. I've done 2 head gasket jobs on that thing in 3,000 miles, so nobody can argue with me against it. It is unreliable. And it also has 3 fatal flaws built into it versus this Range Rover's 2 fatal flaws or the Discovery's 1 fatal flaw. What was the most practical? Well, I would say overall, in terms of when you consider front seat room, rear seat room, and cargo area, it would be the Range Rover. The Range Rover has a great split tailgate design. It's got a decent sized cargo area. It's got the best rear seat room of all 3 of them. It's got the best ride quality. It's got the best luxuries and comfort and amenities like this navigation system. And it's honestly, for what it is, it has the best mileage as well. It gets around 13, 14, which is understandable for a car of this size with this engine. What is the best Land Rover though? This is the big one. The best Land Rover is the P38 Range Rover. It's the best off-road, it's the best looking, it's the most luxurious, and it's characterful just like the others. It is the best Land Rover of the early 2000s, if you ask me. And you can pick these things up for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 all day long. I mean, it's a tremendous value for what you get. So that's gonna do it for me on this ultimate comparison video. Thanks everybody for watching. Bye bye.